Hello there, traders. Once again, this is Terrence Tan from My Impossible Investors, and I'm going to do another market summary and market update video together with all of you. All right, so I'm going to highlight some of the trades that I did live together with my students all throughout this week. Right, so no matter how crazy markets are, right, the key fact is that there will always be trading opportunities if you know where to look for them. Right, but of course, if you do not know, right, but you're very interested to trade in this current market, right, you can always come to one of our sessions, right, and then, right, decide if you want to join me live on a weekly basis to identify these opportunities together for the next entire year, right? So yes, that's what we do over here. We trade our students every single week, right, for a year, right, if you're interested to figure out how to trade, right, in a meaningful and profitable way, right? Now, so with all that said over here, right, market looks like, right, it's back up on a tear over here. But, right, that wasn't exactly the case of what the story was, right? But before I do that, let me highlight the bigger picture right now. So if you were missing out on the market, right, back on April 14th, right, what the market did over here was the golden cross, right? But this golden cross was known as the death cross because what it did over here was that the 50-day moving average, right, actually crossed from above to below, right, the 200-day moving average right now. So this doesn't just confirm that now we are officially in a bear market, right, and on top of the correction move that we already have, right? So this is actually a bearish tone, right, on the overall trend of the market right now. And right, despite this market bouncing over here, right, what we can actually see right now is a bounce all the way, right, perhaps maybe towards the 50-day moving average line, right, before we get the next sell-off. Right. Okay. So, when you're in a bearish market, the tone or the music that's being played is always to sell on rallies. Right. But, okay, there are many pitfalls that you have to pay attention to. Right. So, what we have over here is basically a big rip. Right. Okay. It's similar to this rip that we have that happened in just one day, right, before the market resumes the selling. Right. So now we have a second rip over here. Right. And you just need to check, right, if, right, this is actually strong enough and the market is going to continue going higher. Right, but right, there are of course some telltale signs. Okay, now so when you look at the daily picture, this is what you see. It actually seems pretty bullish, right? But okay, if you tune it out, all right, and smoothen the whole picture, right, into a weekly trend, right, you would actually realize that the entire week, right, from the high to the low of this week, right, you can just pay attention over here, okay, for the information. So you can see that the low of the week was actually 508.5. All right, and the high of this week is actually 551. Right, so the market literally traded a $42 range. Now, you may be wondering, Terrence, $42 doesn't sound like much, but do you realize this is $42 on a stock, right, of the S&P 500 ETF, right? Now, so the stock version is basically 1/10 of the value of the index. So a $42 range literally means a 420-point range on the actual index itself, right? That's literally, right, if you look at things over here, right, almost a 5-6% range from the low to the high. Right now, so this tells you one big story. The market is still absolutely volatile right now. So although we had a big surge up this week, right, all it takes right now is another tweet to the negative side, right, that's going to send it all the way back down, right, and maybe even challenge the low that we had very recently. Right now, so market is not really about all technical analysis right now. It's all about the fear, right? It's all about the tweets, right? It's all about the uncertainty that's going on, right? And all right, we witnessed the death cross that was happening earlier on the daily charts, but another cross is actually potentially setting up, right, on the weekly charts as well, and that doesn't look good, right? And if we go on to the even bigger picture of things, right, can you see that we actually had a bearish, right, reversal candlestick pattern over here, right? It happened almost 3 weeks ago, right? And we are here right now. So what we have this week, right, or this month, right, at the moment, right, is literally just a doji candle, right? So a doji candle doesn't mean, right, anything at all because it's just insignificance. Yeah, right. It's indecision from the market players, right? And the next month's candle, if it's going to be a big red one again, right, we could actually resume, all right, the bearishness that we have right now. Okay, but of course, right, the 50-day moving average and the 200-day moving average together with the 20 month, all right, I apologize for the misstatement over there, all right, the 20-month moving average are all still sloping up, all right, so it's going to take quite a little bit more, right, for all these lines or any of these lines to actually start turning to the downside. Okay, now, so on the bigger picture of things, all right, market is still technically bearish at the moment, right, so the whole play right now is still to sell on rallies, right, rather than to buy on dips. All right, now, so if we put some kind of a trend line over here, right, then you would be able to notice that since the peak over here, all right, we are now trading inside this range, right, that market has been, right? So we hit the top of the range over here, right, and, right, it's all about what's going to happen next week, right? So if we start going from the top of this channel back towards the bottom, right, we could actually see the market go back to about 510, right? So 510 over here is about 5,100, right? So we can see potentially another 400-point drop, right, over the course of just next week itself. Think that's too much to ask for, right? Didn't the market just move a 400-point range, right, this week itself? All right, okay, so market can't do anything right now. So if you're gonna make any trades at all, you better know what you're doing, right? So having said that over here, Terrence, right, did you actually get into any trades at all this week? All right, and we actually did. All right, that's the amazing part, all right, because let me show you some of the trades that we did over here, all right, just on April 23rd, all right, okay, which is this day over here, right? We actually got in on the trade right at the market opening, or about 1 hour after the market opening at about 10:30, right? So I decided to sell, right, an iron Condor, right, on that day itself, right? Now, so what I'm expecting over here is just a non-trending day, right? A day where there's not going to be any major big swings either on the up or the downside. All right, now, so we took on this trade over here and collected about $152, right? And very quickly over here, you realize, right, this was the trade opening, right? And then about 40 minutes later, right, we actually got the trade closed, right, for just $114, right? So this trade over here made about $40, right, on an investment of I think $1,000 to get this trade done. Yeah, all right. So it's about 4% return, right, in just short of 45 minutes on their trade. All right. So that was a really, really quick one. All right. There was an in and out of the market. Right. And then what happened was to take advantage of this extreme move up over here leading up to Thursday. Right. What we then did on Thursday was we went ahead, right, and actually sell a call spread. Right. If you can see over here, right, we sold a call spread on Thursday, which was April 24th. Right, at about 11 p.m. All right, okay, so there was already an upswinging move, right, and we took advantage of that and set a call, right, that we sold at 554. Right, so if that isn't clear to you, let me show you where the line was. Right now, so 554 is essentially somewhere here, okay, and right, the SPY was only trading at about, I would say, when I did it. All right, let's be really exact over here, shall we? All right, so I entered the trade at about 11:11 on the 24th. All right, now, so 24th will be somewhere here. All right, 11:11. This is 23rd, 24th. Market open, 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 open. 11:11. Here we are. All right, now, so the SPY was trading about 542. All right, when I actually sold the call spread. All right, so can you see that I'm actually selling, all right, a call and expecting the market not to be able to go up by another $12. Right? So the market has already steadily climbed up, right, from the bottom of the week, which was 508, to this point, which is 542. That's already an up rebound of $30. So that's 300 points over the span of, I would say, 3 days. Right? And with only 1.5 days left, right, I'm challenging the market to hit up by another $12 on top of what is already done. All right, and for that, all right, I'm actually able to collect 13 cents, right, on a $1 spread. All right, so this would have potentially made me a 13% return in just 1 day, right? If this option were going to expire worthless, right, come Friday's closing, right? And of course, if you see the Friday's closing over here, market closed at 550. So yes, it did continue surging up, but it was not enough to hit me. Right, so these options that I sold over here expired worthless, right? On Friday itself, I can show you over here, right? Because the broker actually equates that is 0, 0 for the 2 call options over here. So they've expired worthless after the market closed, right? And I was able to reap out my profits, right? But Right, I was actually not done yet. Right, why was I saying that I was not done? Because right on Friday's trading itself, right after the market opened, right, we kind of expected the market to have a non-trending day. Right, so when that happened over here, we got in right to another trade on the open. Right, so if you noticed over here, I think yes, this was the trade that we got in. There we are. All right, we got into this trade over here at about 9:47 p.m. right for another iron condor. All right, so we sold an iron condor, right, and collected $154, right, at about 9:47, right, and if you noticed over here, right, at about 10:01, just 15 minutes later, we hit our profits target again, right, and right again, right, it was a trade that was very similar to the previous one, right, which means we once again pulled out another 4% return, right, in just 15 minutes of a trade that we took in the markets. All right, now, so these are some of the amazing trades that we managed to take, right, in and out, right, of what was a crazy week, right, where many traders would have either decided to stay out altogether, right, or too afraid, right, to even trade at all, right? So are there threats that's going to happen in the markets right now? Right, there definitely is, right? So if you're not clear, right, let me point out some to you, right? So the bonds over here, right, have, right, kind of in a way rebounded as well. Right, so yeah, it does look red over here, right? But it's on a dark move. You realize every single day the bonds are opening higher and then closing lower, opening higher, closing lower, opening higher, closing lower, right? But it's still aging up. All right. Okay, this is something you definitely do not see very often at all. Why? Because if the stock is going up, the candles should always be green. All right, but here, right, we have red candles. Right, which is very similar to this part that you see over here. So what does it mean? Right, trends that happens in the market often replay itself. All right, now, so if you noticed over here, we have also a kind of like a bearish crossover, right, where the 20 has already cut below the 50. Right, so this is another stock over here which allows you to sell on the rallies. Right now, so what we have this week, right, that ends over here on Friday was another doji. So if we have a reversal, right, to the downside over here on Monday, right, this can actually means that it will lead to another sell-off, right, in the bonds itself, right? So bonds have recovered together with the markets over here. That's a natural cause, right, of what's going on, right? But if the bonds was to start coming off, right, it's going to drag the markets along with it, right? And right, this week, right, although the market has gone up, it's all about one major sector once again, right? It's a risk on, all right, rebound. Right, what do I mean by risk on rebound over here? Right, the entire rebound that you have all week was led once again by the technology sector, a sector that has been missing in action for a really long time. Right, why? Because there's just too much risk involved. Right, so if you look at this over here, right, doesn't this XLK move, which is the technology ETF stock, right, look very similar to the SPY? It does look like a carbon copy, isn't it? Right? But if you factor in the next major component, right, of the S&P itself, then you realize, hey, this doesn't look as healthy, right? Because the XLF, right, doesn't look like it was a major player, right, inside this entire upward move, right? So if the financial sectors is not participating, right, and if the energy sector is also not participating in the rally that we have this week, right, it also means that it's not a rally that was done across the board, right? So that's something that you should be very concerned about, right? And lastly, over here, just to wrap things up, right, before I end this video with all of you, right, another thing that's happening right now is the lack of volume. Right, so yes, we have an up move over here, but can you see that it's all happening on lowered volume in the markets? All right, so volume hasn't been very, very hefty in the market, right, where you have upside participation, right? So it all means, right, that this up move over here is happening on the back, right, of a lack of liquidity in the marketplace itself. Right now, so there's still a lot that can play on over here, right? And I hope this video, right, can get you on the right track and keep you, right, out of potential troubles in the market, right? So market is still potentially setting up, right, for a major one-day quick turnaround and sell off, right? Okay, so if you're going to take any trades over here, you better know what you're doing, right? So with this video, I hope I brought things to your attention over here and I've enriched, right, your trading progress, right, as a trader seeking profitability, right? And once again, right, if you'd like to find out more about how you can trade with us, right, just come down to one of our live online introduction sessions, right? I'll welcome you there. This is Terence Tan, the I'm Possible Investor, signing off this video together with all of you, right? Trade safely, everybody. Bye for now.